irrelevant, you know, as far as the odds of any of us dying in a terrorist act are virtually zero. But yet you turn on the television and that seems to be a very common topic continuously, and then they change, you know, the language, so now the war in, say, Iraq is no longer a war against, you know, insurgents, it's a war against terrorism. So then you have this nonsense that's perpetually built upon, and they did the same thing, you know, with communism. You know, they did the same, they just need these enemies, you know, for that example. But the media tells us what to think, and it creates a state of mind, and we tend to absorb that and create an identity with it, and then we end up projecting it. So, and that's the thing about, we're so influenced that we have to be very careful in how we behave in multiple levels. And that's one of the things about consciousness that many don't really realize. Coming to the new film, one of the things that I talk about is the free market system, or what I call more generally the monetaryism as a general distinction, which is more of an invented word, where all societies, doesn't matter what they are, if they're communist or socialist or even fascist or free market, capitalist, they all have the same type of competitive structure inherently, because it's still exists. We all exist within scarcity. So there's a taking mechanism that comes naturally in the environment. I don't say naturally because that's the way we are. There is this debate, of course, between human nature and human behavior, nature versus nurture, these attributes. And I tend to find, in my understanding, this brings me back to this point on the awareness, is that it's I'd say 90% behaviorism is what conducts what we do. In other words, our environment dictates what how we communicate. And obviously, you know, I could be born in the Middle East, and I could be born to a Muslim family, and odds are I would be speaking Arabic and be Muslim. So, like, for example, religion, as in regards to this type of, regards to the same point that we're discussing, as far as this brainwashing, so to speak, is the way I would put it, sort of conditioning, which we touched upon, it's completely arbitrary as far as the established religions. If you're born in this area, you're most likely going to be in that religion. So most people don't think that way, you know, which I find fascinating. But anyway, that's a little bit of a sidetrack from what I meant to say as far as the free market capitalism and everything else. We live in an environment that rewards competitive and chiseling mentalities, parasitic mentalities, where all of our established institutions, in order to survive, they have to get money. In order to get money, they have to basically fight for it one way or another. They don't call it fighting; they call it negotiation, or they call it this and that.
Clever words.
Yes, but what it really is, it's the whole species is divided in this us against them type of element on a daily basis. Just because, in order to survive, you have to do certain things for your own self-interest. You have to take, as opposed to give. And the difference, I think, is that our environment now has conditioned us into this overwhelmingly selfish mentality that really has reached the point where things like the corruption of the Iraq War and say a cat burglar, there's no difference whatsoever. We start with, you know, this general type of, I broke my thought there for a second, but there's no difference between someone who is a cat burglar needing to survive because they come from scarcity, or more specifically saying, where I come from, you know, South Central Los Angeles, there's no jobs, everyone sells drugs, they're addicted to drugs because they're upset, because they're in this hard environment of poverty. So they do what they have to do to survive. There's no difference between that type of criminal behavior and then, say, the high corporate elite that chooses to invade a country to take its resources and take it over and create, you know, all the elements that it wants for its own personal gain. It's the same mechanism. And I think that's something that hasn't been realized, and it's the environment that's to blame for all of this. Granted, survival is inherent, it's a genetic basis that we want to live, but how we conduct our living is based on what we've been taught as far as what the necessity is. So back to my original point is that everything is taken in this system, one way or another, or manipulated. You manipulate your environment to get what you need one way or another. If I want a job, I have to go in and convince the boss that I need that job. If the boss wants to give me a low wage, he has to convince me that for some reason that they have to give me this wage. I have to convince, you know, if I go and I have to compete with someone else that needs the job. You could twist this around into all sorts of, you know, seemingly endless spirals of, like, that's just the way it is and it's okay. It's not really corrupt. Because I get these arguments all the time.
But it changes the person, doesn't it? Because, it's like you say, you have to become vicious into
to a
get
certain
that
degree.
job. Yes,
Yes, you do. And people say, well, you know, you don't have to get that job there, but actually everyone has to work, one way or another. This is one of those things in the system that no one talks about. And the mechanism is this manipulative, chiseling, parasitic, taking type of mentality. And my original point, which I've jumped around a lot, is that I think the conscious awakening has to occur when people realize that it's giving and not taking that is the key. So in a new society, which is what I advocate in the new film, the shift would have to be that people realize that their integrity is only as good as the integrity of everything else around them. For example, if I'm walking down the street and I see a homeless person, I know that through time that there might be a propensity for that homeless person to commit crime because they have to survive. They might have to rob people, they might have to do what they have to do. And when pushed in a corner, like an animal, in fear, you know, they're going to do what they have to do to survive.
Exactly. Fight or flight?
Well, sure, yeah. So as long as there's a homeless person or a person that's that's deprived and abused, perhaps, I'm not safe. And this is something no one really thinks about. And no one's safe in this system in general because it divides everything up. Because there's always the haves and have-nots due to the system. Because there's always edges in the system. There's manipulative edges that certain groups can gain. It's inherent. It's inherently corrupt, basically, is the way I would describe it. So in order to combat that, in order to combat, say, someone that's going to rob you and hurt you, which is simultaneous to combat the corruption of a ruling elite, in my opinion, you have to start altering the environment and altering the consciousness of the people. And to do that, people have to realize that they have to start contributing to the world at large in more of a communal sense. It can't be a selfish mechanism. It can't be survival of the fittest. It can't be, like the old Adam Smith free market ideology of, you preserve yourself and everyone does things for themselves, and therefore society will work out as a whole by some invisible hand, which is what he used to claim. And I'm not putting down Adam Smith. There's a lot of things, good things that he did say. I'm just using that as an example because he's one of these fathers of this free market system. And it's also related to all other forms. It's not just the free market. People think I'm just attacking capitalism and things like that. I've been working on this concept called the Zeitgeist Movement, which is an attempt at a grassroots, conscious awakening, environmental shift for literally the species, as ambitious as that might sound. You tend to find most movements are politically oriented, they're regional, they're specific to certain things. I've yet to see something that really would attempt to unite humanity, and especially with an actual tangible train of thought, not just, hyperbole of idealism. So after the first film came out, everyone asked me, well, what do we do about these issues? What do we do about these problems? And I thought about it, of course, myself. The first film doesn't give much of an answer to anything like that, except at the very end, when I talk about consciousness in general, the need for people to realize how they're interconnected. Very quickly, I denote that through a few different personalities at the very end, which I actually pick up with in the new film. Things like that. What I found through my research as I was approaching the new film, I discovered was a man named Jacques Fresco and a project called the Venus Project. Jacques Fresco is about 92 years old now. He's been working his entire life thinking about social design, thinking about something that you typically never hear about, where you actually design society to benefit society, as opposed to this kind of environment we're in now, where everything is just kind of a free-for-all with different levels of differential advantage. Everyone wants to sell something. Nothing really gets done in our current society unless money can be made from it. There are all sorts of problems, such as the fact that we think we live in a free society. Well, you might be free enough to step out your door and walk down the street and go buy things, but you're only as free as your purchasing power will allow you to be.
Exactly.
So, it's really, there's no such thing in a monetary system as a free country. It doesn't exist.